Right. Good morning. If you're watching the replay, you can always fast forward to about 2 minutes, and that's usually when I'm started. Good morning. Good morning. It is Monday, and I am just sharing in the group. If you haven't already joined the group, Rise and Shine with Morning Moon, be sure to do so that you can anchor into your wellness foundations. Gonna share. Here we go. Getting shared. People can join. All right. And we are live. Let's hit the record button. Make sure I don't have lipstick on my teeth this time. Okay. All right. I think we got it, everyone. I think we did it. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome back. Today is Monday. We're already back at Monday again. And we are mid-April, and it is the beautiful, beautiful beginning of Bright Week, the week after Jesus's ascension. So my name is Coach Lacy, and this is Rise and Shine with Morning Moon. If you haven't already anchored into your wellness foundations, be sure to do so in the group Rise and Shine with Morning Moon on Facebook. You can also download the checklist on my website, www.lacyjwatson.com. Download the Release Foundations Guide so that you can check in with the daily checklist, anchor into your habits every day, and check in with your Circle of Life seasonal check in there. Really, I'm using that word a lot. Oh, so today is Monday, and I hope you all had a wonderful, beautiful Easter weekend. It was so just revitalizing, and it was really good for my husband and I. We had a beautiful, beautiful weekend, and today is the beginning of Bright Week, which this is meant to be a reflective time for people and to reflect upon your blessings and all of the sins that have been forgiven in your life through the death and ascension of Jesus Christ. So if that's something you don't celebrate, then just reflect on what you're grateful for this week. And today I'm going to talk about something that I was thinking about this weekend in relation to all the events that I had going on, because we had quite a few events to go to this weekend, and somehow we made them all. Somehow we made all of them. I think actually there was one that we dipped out early on, but for the most part, we made all of the events, and that got me thinking about the profound power of just simply showing up. And I noticed that as I have gone through life, and in my 20s it was pretty difficult to show up for myself and show up for others in the way that I'm able to now here at almost 40 years old. So it's a muscle that you have to work out, and it's just like anything, it's something that you have to work hard at, especially if you have anxiety. But I'm sure that you've had moments where um you you don't want to show up. You don't want to show up to the event. You don't want to show up to class. You don't want to show up to your own meeting, whatever it is, you just don't feel like showing up. And maybe you've had moments where you just want to avoid the situation completely because there's like awkwardness, uncertainty, discomfort, or maybe you're just simply exhausted from the week or whatever, the life that you've lived. And maybe it's just a simple feeling of feeling out of place. There are times where I've definitely felt like I don't want to show up because I don't feel like I belong. Um, the moments of awkwardness and discomfort and like not knowing people and being unsure of yourself, and being a little frustrated because maybe you don't like someone in the room, or someone doesn't like you, but despite these feelings, there's just an immense strength in just choosing to show up anyways, and choosing to do it afraid, and choosing just to show up and experience the feelings that you have and the growth during this time, and sometimes you're just simply tired and you don't feel like it, and that's a valid feeling. That's a valid thing to feel. So it could be that you just are anxiety. But for me, I found that time and time again when I don't want to show up, and these exact same scenarios where I'm feeling awkward because someone I know, that I might have tension with will be there, or I don't know anybody, and that causes tension. Um, it's these exact spaces, the moments and the spaces that we resist, that the real growth happens. So showing up, and especially when you don't know what's going to happen, or the path isn't clear, or are apprehensive and you don't feel like safe, not in the way that you're going to be harmed physically, but in the way that you just don't feel emotionally sure of yourself. It's one of the bravest actions that you could ever do, to do it afraid. And it's one of the most bravest things we could do, um, for ourselves and for our personal growth, to just show up. It's an act of loyalty, and it's not just an act of loyalty to those around us, but it's an act of loyalty to ourselves, to our value system and our belief system, and to our integrity. It's a measure of integrity to show up, and loyalty, to be loyal to yourself and to others and those that you love. It's not just about sticking around when things are easy. It's easy. It's anyone can do that. Anyone can stick around when the going gets easy. But when the going gets tough, um, it's more difficult to stand firm. And when storms hit and when chaos ensues, it's really easy to just walk away and run away, and not and hide, and not show up. And sometimes it's good to walk away from tense moments or situations that don't serve us. But I'm talking about those moments that just are a little bit uncomfortable, when it's just a little uncertain, or when you're just hurt by someone, not hurt in the way of being like physically hurt or just emotionally traumatized, but just hurt by whatever they may have said or done. And this type of discomfort shows up a lot in families. So in families, especially during holiday seasons, families can have a lot of discomfort. Political discomfort is a big topic for the day. I will use that as an example. So say you have an aunt or an uncle or someone that is on a different political spectrum as you, and you have to meet for a family dinner. It makes that dinner a little tense. So you might not show up because you don't want to see that person and get into that argument with that person that you can't seem to avoid. Well, rather than avoiding that person, and avoiding, someone that you love, that you are related to, that you have good memories with, someone that hasn't hurt you, but you have a disconnect with, that you're a little annoyed with, or you don't like this about them, or whatever, those little things. There's more power in showing up and avoiding those. We don't have to have those conversations about politics, or the hurts and the pains of the habits of the past, or we don't have to have these conversations, right? We can be mature, and we can still be loyal to those people that we love, and still love them, and stand firm. Um, and when these hurts seep in, and our ego wants us to pull back and run and avoid the person, we need to anchor in to the things that we love and the things that we're grateful for. Number one, about that person, if they're family, I'm using family as an example because we just had a holiday, and it's really easy for families to disconnect over silly stuff. And we need to be honest with ourselves about loyalties, and loyalty. What is loyalty? Loyalty is a word that's thrown around easily, but the essence of loyalty is profound. Loyalty is a choice. Loyalty is a conscious, concerted effort. It is choosing consciously to honor commitments and relationships, even when doing so is not convenient or it doesn't feel good. Especially when honoring those commitments and showing up might be uncomfortable or sometimes painful. So this type of loyalty reveals our integrity and our maturity and the depths of our soul. There's something so increasingly troubling in the world lately, especially when it comes to young people. There's this vein of there's like this school of thought that people are basing their loyalty purely on their emotions of the moment. The word toxic is thrown around a lot. Like, you're toxic, I'm cutting you off. This cutting off people that are toxic movement is one of the ego, and it fails to look at yourself. It's a self-inflating, um, self-perpetuating and inflating thought process. It doesn't hold any weight. People are basing their loyalty on emotions, and that means they'll share their secrets freely, abound in lifelong friendships, walk away from family, all because of temporary feelings or the need to uphold a personal narrative. Because we tell ourselves stories, and we have these narratives that happen, especially when chaos ensues, and especially when conflict happens. There's a narrative that's started. There's your story, their story, and then there's the truth. And so in there becomes a narrative that we tell ourselves. And depending on how spiritually mature we are, and how what level of self-awareness that we have, we can take a moment to say, okay, what am I contributing to this? And what is this narrative that I'm spinning? Because these narratives have the power to shape your life. And we don't, I say this as someone who used to, as a young person, when I was very young, like 18, 19, I was the victim. I was always the victim. My mom was very strict, and she was a very good mother. But in my mind, because I was just a teenage dirtbag, I had all teenagers go through their version of things. My version was pretty rough. And my version was that of a victim. I was drug addicted, and it was always everybody else's fault but my own. And I remember telling these narratives that my mom was abusive and that she was hurtful to me, but really she just didn't let me do whatever I wanted. And so I spun this story around to the family, and it actually impacted my family for generations, and it impacted a vein of my family, a strain, impacted a friendship, it impacted a um emotions and a relationship between my uncle and my mother, and my aunt and my mother, and my uncle and mother, or my uncle and my aunt, have since passed on. And those rifts that I created with my mouth never were healed. And so I owe a debt, I owe a debt to my family for being such a brat, and spinning these narratives and having these stories that I told. And it really fractured my family. And someday I will be held accountable. And I am already held accountable. I already am held accountable for that, because there's been so much that happened. And loyalty is something that transcends those emotional storms, and it really demands your spiritual maturity. And I was not spiritually mature. I was not aware. I was not self-aware. And because of my temporary feelings, I destroyed part of my family, for lack of a better word. And so reflecting on this makes me really think about all those moments where I could have made different choices. But now, thankfully, I'm spiritually mature enough to take a look at the contributions that I've had and reflect on that so I can share it with others. Right. And so when you are thinking about loyalty, you want to think about, you know, not only the people around you, but being loyal to yourself and being loyal to your integrity. And I always think about the time where the horse stepped on my foot. So I've told this story quite a few times, but if you haven't heard it already, I do volunteering at a horse riding center for the disabled, and I do lead walking, and that means I lead a horse with a rider who often has autism. They're nonverbal, sometimes they're wheelchair bound, and they have special um, they have special um, adjustments for the horses. But anyways, I lead walk the horse, and for this particular lesson, the kiddo that I was lead walking for is nonverbal um and gets frightened a little bit, would be frightened easily. And so the horse stepped on my foot, and I had a moment of where I had to choose of whether I was going to scream because it really hurt, and I pulled my foot out and it took my toenail. Um, but it didn't crush my foot, but it was bleeding. And I had to decide, really snap judgment of whether or not I was going to make a big deal out of this, scream, cry, whatever, or just suck it up, buttercup, and walk up to the stage and let someone know and fix it, you know. And that's what I did. I sucked it up. I didn't scream. I didn't do anything. I just said, hey, the horse stepped on my foot. I need to sit down and fix this. And then I drove home. I sat down, I took it off, I took the shoe off, I wrapped my foot up, and I drove home, and then I stopped at home, and then I went to the emergency room. So, and it really hurt. It was like bleeding all over. So the whole reason that I did this was because I knew that if I screamed and I reacted impulsively and I let the whole world know that I was in pain, that little kid would have never wanted to get back on that horse ever again, because it was such a frightening time. So I quietly acknowledged that hurt, tended to my wounds, and then choose to move forward calmly. And this scenario speaks volumes whenever I am faced with any situation. And there's been a few situations recently where I wanted to react differently, but I just stepped back. And, you know, how we deal with chaos and how we deal with our emotions reveals whether we operate from a place of reactivity or a place of being grounded in wisdom. And that just takes time. It's, if it's something that you're not good at now, I wasn't good at it. I wasn't always good at it, but through time, I've managed to be able to anchor in. That's another habit, anchoring in. Over the years, I've come to understand that um, when it comes to things like loyalty and integrity, loyalty especially, it has a cost. There's a price tag attached to it, and it's a long-term commitment to growth. It's a long-term commitment to truth and love, even when it's painful or when it's challenging. It means standing by the people who sometimes disappoint us. But when we have true compassion for them and we recognize their humanity and we see them, and we recognized our shared journey, that is what you call agape. That is the namaste. That is, I see you. So it means that we want to just stay present, even when every impulse wants to retreat into that comfort and safety and the or stepped on my foot. Even when every impulse wants to have validation, you know, it's moving beyond our impulses. And that's how you do it. That's how you move beyond your impulses. You see the bigger picture and you see people for who they really are, you know, and ask yourself, am I too quick to judge and dismiss others based on temporary discomfort or misunderstanding? Or am I brave enough to, you know, take a look at them and see what they're going through and forgive them for maybe what they've done or said, and to learn from it and to grow. Or if we're in a situation where we just don't want to show up and we just don't want to show up because this is about showing up, what can you learn from that? And what can you be thankful for in that situation? You know, the The relationships that challenge us the most and the situations that challenge us the most often have the deepest lessons. And that's super cliche, but it's really, really true. You know, think about your own life and think about the lessons you've learned. Lessons aren't learned in a moment. Like lessons are not learned in that moment. They're learned upon reflection in the moments, in these different moments. And uh, it takes some evaluating of our own actions and our own loyalties and where we show up, where we don't show up. Where are you showing up? Where could you improve showing up? How are you showing up? How do you want to show up in the world? you know, and who are you loyal to? What are you loyal to? What loyalties could need, some reevaluating? You know, what loyalties, not just people, but places and things and commitments. What loyalties and commitments do you have that you might not fully understand their purpose, but you could lean in a little more and deepen that commitment and strengthen that bond because there's something bigger, you know. And on the other side of that, what loyalties do you have that might actually be unhealthy attachments? What might actually be unhealthy? Sometimes we hold on too hard, and that's a whole nother conversation. We want to show up and we want to see how, we want to show up and we want to see how things unfold and we want to show up in the world at the full expression of ourselves, but we don't want to do it at the detriment of our health. And so what does that look like? That's a whole nother conversation that we should have tomorrow because that's valid. So I really want you to think about today. Your assignment for today, if you enjoy doing the assignments, is to journal about this and sit quietly and reflect on where you're showing up, how you're showing up, where you're not showing up, and where your loyalties lie. Like deep in your spirit, where do your loyalties lie? Like, how do you show up for yourself? How do you show up for your family? How do you show up for your friends? How do you show up for your integrity and your principles and what you stand for? How do you show up for what you believe in? Sometimes, loyalty means uncertainty and trusting that clarity and purpose and the divine design will unveil itself in time. But the choices we make today become tomorrow's memories, and they shape our greatest joys and our deepest regrets. So I would say to aim to create a life where you're proud of how you showed up in the world and where you operate from a place of gratitude, grateful for everyone in your life, even if they have baggage. We all have backpacks we're carrying up the mountain. Some people's are bigger, some people's are stacked, no one's perfect. We all have our stuff. But what stories are you selling yourself about those people in your life where you are not telling the truth about your part in that story? Or what stories are you telling yourself and others about events, people, places, and things in your life that aren't showing the whole picture? What are you missing? Our choices today affect our memories tomorrow. Don't have a life full of regret. Show up for yourself. Show up for others. Be filled with peace and integrity. I come to you every day with these little nuggets of wisdom because I have been the person that had no integrity. I have been the person that had not showed up. I would not show up. I've been the person that doesn't show up. I've been the person that, uh, has said hurtful things, but I've also been the person who has been hurt. I've also been the person who has been fiercely loyal and been, pooped on. I've been the person who has, shown up every day and have yet to reap the reward. I've been the person who has surrendered and made my life renewed because I have a new heart and a new mind. And how do you do that? Well, you anchor in. So, have you anchored in today, my friends? Whether it be in your journaling, your reading, your exercise, your whole foods, water, drink your water. Anchor in. And as we move forward into Bright Week, make it a time of renewal and deeper understanding and being mindful and reflect on how you want to show up in the world. It's okay to be uncomfortable. Embrace it. You're always going to be uncomfortable. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. Period. If you're comfortable, you're not growing. But hold on to integrity and loyalty and doing what's right. Holding on to the people that love you and that are loyal to you too. Not those people that you've known for a month or a year, but the ones that have been there your whole life, that show up even when you're at your worst. Maybe sometimes those people that you've met for a month or a year will become that. And to keep showing up for them in a purposeful and mindful way is important. But not forgetting those who have walked with you in the darkest moments of your life. And the ones that you've walked with in your dark or their darkest moments. It's an ebb and flow. It's push and pull. Life is so much bigger. There's so much more. So anchor in, reflect deeply, and I will see you tomorrow. It is Tuesday. Tomorrow's Tuesday, today's Monday. I hope you have a lovely, beautiful, beautiful day, and I will see you.